And what about JonBenet Ramsey? They have just brought that back. It was on TV last night and again tonight, the second part. I'm showing this because this is one of the murders that was on the list. I talk about the list of murders that used mind control and was done in patterns. And I'm going to go back to they won't find the forensic evidence that they're looking for in this case because it was done with mind control. So that has to do with patterns that were deliberately done. One would be, and it would, and you have to come to me for that. And they won't allow it in court because they say that it involves mind control and it is not visual. I think is the comment they made. And then they would have to tell about me and my kidnapping. Uh, so therein lies part of this. I was kidnapped from Buckingham Palace. I'm Margaret Ann Windsor, Queen Victoria II, legal heir to the British crown. My father's was a forced takedown, removal, and my father was actually married to American Claudia Ruth O'Keefe, sister to artist George O'Keefe from Madison, Wisconsin. My father never married Wallace Simpson. She married a double, an imposter. She was an American spy. So I'm going to get into Crown of Thorns if I've had one. That's what it's been. Kidnapped and brought to Moulton, Alabama in 41 at age 2. I was born in 39, and here's my Uncle George, who's part of the people that kidnapped me and took down my father. In 1939, the year I was born, he already had gotten rid, he and the Illuminati, the New World Order, that kidnapped me, the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Bilderbergers, Kennedy's was appointed. Kennedy was appointed by Roosevelt. And his two sons, JFK, and that's why the cover up of the Warren Commission, it would have led back to my kidnapping. But the two sons, the older son and JFK, actually flew into England many times prior to my birth or at the time of my birth. And they kept flying in a couple of years after I was kidnapped. Now, I got across, and I do know that they were the ones that kidnapped me, the ones I've just said. And I only am assuming that JFK and his brother may have flown me over. I know they were part of the kidnapping. But I was brought to Cortland Air Base that had just been built outside Moulton, Alabama, where they dropped me off in a pigsty. And they stole my identity. And it was two men that brought me, and it wasn't JFK. These were two slender men that looked like the photos that you see of G-men, okay? And they came back later, and one day, not too much later after I was dropped off there, and I hope the world gets to see that part of what they did to me, all right? I hope they get to see all of it. But I wanted to get into, I wrote a book, again, to give you information, background. I wrote a book, and I was writing a book. I'd worked for doctors. I was writing about mind control murders using patterns. Mind control is invisible. So these were done in patterns, and they are provable. Some of them are not that hard to prove, all right? Anyway, they don't want to tell about mind control. They don't want to tell about my kidnapping, the illegal takedown of my father, and the lies told, and the takeover of everything British. The United States established their own monarch with George VI. While I'm being held in the United States and held captive, still, I'm not free to do anything really. It may appear that way, that I can go to the grocery store when I have funds, etc., but indeed it's not, or I wouldn't be sitting here in the hellhole going through what I'm going through. And I don't know where my children are, Mark and Scott. So much were done to them, They're heirs after me, so they don't want any of that told. If these were deliberately done that I've told about. It's called The List, and when I was out at Flint's, and by the way, Larry Flynt was shot while I was doing the book in Marietta, Georgia. He was shot March the 6th of 1978 in Lawrenceville. By the way, they took me to Lawrence County and Alabama. That's where Moulton is, and gave me another name, where it was a set of twins that had been killed by Lina, their mother. They were born illegitimate. And so I grew up being called bastard, everything in the book. And here later, Simpson. So I'm just showing a few things that connect. Wallace Simpson was illegitimate of birth. And I also worked in April Fool Day of 80, when they almost killed me after I tried to get the book published, and had a letter from the FBI, ongoing investigation, national security involved. So I went to work May in the condition I was in of 80. In Huntsville, I was illegally taken back, and I went to work for the district attorney of Madison County, Huntsville, Alabama, Fred Simpson, as in Wallace Warfield Simpson. Is using the name Simpson. And at that time, I did not know about my kidnapping. I'm told subconsciously I did. But when I learned in 83, I remembered a lot, and I've put it up. While working for the district attorney, I lived at Warren House Apartments. As in the Warren Commission, the Kennedys' involvement, his shooting, they covered it up, quite frankly, so that it wouldn't lead back to my kidnapping. And the person that lived directly below my apartment at Warren House, and one apartment over, which would be to the left, was Carl Smith, an FBI agent. So I'm not going to get into telling about him. I want to finish this. I'm just going to give you a couple here. The List was a book that, let me show you this, and I'll get back real quick. I showed you my father, and it's the double that married Simpson. And I want to show this. This is just a couple of pictures that was left, that was made of me back then. That's George. This is the family. That was me. This is Lina Dempsey, the mother that killed the twins, the psychopath. This is another picture of me in high school. And the family. And here, George says to me, he sent this to me. He says, and this is him here. And he said this was a picture of him in 38, but you weren't born then. So he's just supporting what I said. My birthday that they gave me is in 1939, and the state of Alabama actually marked through the birth dates of Carl, the twin, and Peggy, that they gave me her name, because they were born in 1938. I was the birth date given me, and I'm assuming it was correct date of birth, was 1939. That's the date I always used in high school for everything. So then I got the death certificate for Carl, and they've got him dying before he was born. So anyway, I'm throwing that in. But I wanted to get back to the Ramsey. In the Ramsey, JonBenet's death, first of all, I'm just going to give you the patterns. It's like a fingerprint, okay? First, let me get back to this. The list is a long list of the murders that I'm talking about using mind control. And there's a long list of them, and I'm sure you'd never know the truth about some of them. You use mind control to kill. You can create cancer and illness. You can cure it. It's the belief is part of it, but it's the Tesla files, mind control used. Like to program people to shoot, use a truck to mow down a bunch of people 18-wheeler in France or butcher knife. And what's going on right now in St. Cloud, Minnesota has to do with the crypt. I'm talking about the patterns. St. Cloud was the street that Larry Flynt lived on in Bel Air. I think I said he was shot in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and that's what I was writing about, mind control murders. He says here in that article endorsement that I know who was responsible for his shooting in Lawrenceville. So, and he knew about the list, etc. Mr. Flint did when I was out there. So anyway, the list goes back though to also Wayne Williams, who was convicted of the murders of the blacks in Atlanta, which, by the way, continued after he was convicted. There was a book called The List by Chet Detlinger. Chet Detlinger, he was about Wayne Williams' murders. Chet Detlinger was ex-FBI agent, and he was even, I don't think he was formally charged, but they accused him of being the killer. Okay. Now, I want to get to this long list of the murders that go way back before 1976, believe me. But what I want to say was the murders I've told, I didn't have any money, I walked, I starved, I froze, I lived on the Appalachian Trail. Nobody wants to hear this. They know it's true, by the way, who I am and the murders. Okay, the Virginia Tech is another one I'll throw out. The Fort Hood shooter that was a psychiatrist that went to Virginia Tech, and he went on to another school to get his MD, but he was born right here in Roanoke, Vinton area. And so the Columbine, the James Holmes, the Grand Theater, the Tucson, Arizona, with Gabby Gifford and her husband's a twin, Mark Kelly and Scott Kelly, and that's my son's names. They've used it. By the way, I just had a brief place to live. It was in a HUD, which is federal funded. You can check this out. It's Scott Hill out in Clifton Forge, Virginia. So I could go on and you're going to tune me out probably. Nobody wanted to care unless it happened to them. Mind control you're not immune to. It can happen to your child, can be programmed, and they can die or spend the rest of their life in prison because they were programmed to commit a crime that they didn't commit. Because nobody wanted to get into this, and because what do you think's going on with ISIS and all this, the Orlando, Florida, the Dallas, Texas, etc., etc. And by the way, you can prove this. There was another one that was committed in St. Cloud, Minnesota, along when that happened in Dallas, when the policemen were shot about that same time. Okay, if not the same time. Now I want to get back to the Ramsey. This is going to go out. First of all, let me say this. The kidnapping is mentioned in the ransom note, and Patsy, the name Patsy is very important. And the Boulder, the word Boulder, to where I was at the time on Christmas Eve, I think, was when she was killed. But this really gets a whole lot, and I want to say this again. And I contacted the district attorney out there, Patsy Ramsey's attorney, and John Ramsey's attorney. By the way, John Ramsey has a relative, I don't know if it's a sister named Peggy, but it's not just a few things that add up. It's like a fingerprint. Now, this will go out, and I wanted to, well, I forgot. Oh, Linwood, her attorney, their attorney, John and Patsy's attorney. I was in his office. I paid to go there twice. Linwood came as close as he could to me, evidently. He cannot touch it either. When I was living on the Appalachian Trail, and this is true, I have no reason to lie about it. Now, He was also the attorney for Richard Jewell was accused of the Olympic Park when actually they had programmed Eric Rudolph. He's in prison. I'm going to stop so this can go up.